Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of our webinars as part of our Cost of Living campaign. I'm Laura Jameson, and I'm the Prevention Coordinator for Trading Standards Scotland. Our campaign is running throughout September and is looking to raise awareness of potential scams linked to the ongoing cost of living crisis. As prices and bills continue to rise, many consumers will have financial worries heading into autumn and winter. Scammers may attempt to exploit these anxieties and to target people online and via cold calls, emails and text messages in an attempt to obtain their personal details and bank account information. So today we're going to be talking about impersonation scams, and I'd like to warmly welcome our panel and thank you all for joining us. And if I can just invite you to say a little bit about yourselves. If you want to start, Catherine, I'll hand over to you.
Hello, my name is Catherine Hart, and I'm the lead officer for Scams and Doorstep Crime for the Chartered Trading Standards Institute.
Thanks, Catherine. Colin, if I can pass over to you.
I'm Colin Matheson. I'm spokesperson for Advice Direct Scotland. We run the consumeradvice.scot service, providing consumer information and advice to Scottish citizens, and we handle scam reports through scamwatch.scot.
Thanks so much, Colin. And Mark, if I can pass to you.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Armstrong from Neighbourhood Watch Scotland, and I'm one of the community support officers.
Thanks so much, Mark, and thanks everyone again for joining us here today. I think it's fair to say that we've all encountered these sorts of scams, but to open up discussions, which impersonation scams is your organisation most aware of? And Mark, if we can start with you, please.
Well, I'll start off with one that's really common, and we get a lot of stuff about scams round about Amazon. And particularly when the price increase was announced recently, we saw a lot of people getting in touch saying they were getting Amazon scams, saying they were underpaid, so they needed to pay now, that sort of thing to ensure. So definitely round about that time we were getting a lot about that. Delivery scams, yep, definitely. Amazon again, Royal Mail, DPD, all these kind of scams, and I know we'll go into these as we go through the webinar. The .gov scams, that is definitely one we get a lot about. HMRC and really high pressure tactics to try and get people to give over their details. DVLA, that's been one that's been persistent for quite a while. Your due money back, give us your bank details and we'll send you the money you're due, things like that. And I think one that's kind of rearing its head is DWP payments that are going to be coming, and people are concerned about that because you don't actually need to claim these things, but it's the same scam. Give us your details, we'll make sure you get it. And I think there's a big concern about that kind of thing going to be coming.
And I think you're right there, Mark, with what you're saying about that we'll make sure you get it, because there's almost an anxiety there that, you know, I don't want to miss out on this payment. No, that's really helpful.
Absolutely.
Colin, can I come to you next, please?
We've seen a whole host of different impersonation scams, and the common type changes with the seasons and with changes to current world events. So during the pandemic, we've seen scammers adapt to the different events as they unfolded. So starting with counterfeit PPE at the start of the pandemic, to doorstep scammers operating in rural areas and offering to go shopping for elderly people and just never coming back with the money. Moving on to, I think, Neighbourhood Watch seen that one as well. Moving on to test and protect and vaccination scams, always adapting over time with changes and variants. But more recently, we've seen scams focused on the war in the Ukraine and with the cost of living crisis. One particular scam that's been coming up quite a lot recently, both with the consumeradvice.scot guys and our energy teams, has been the cost of living support and the energy rebate scam, looking at claiming to be from Ofgem, reaching out and looking for personal information, personal details to scam people out of money and personal information, basically. So again, a lot of the stuff we see is adapting over time, majority of which are reach out through text message and email.
That's no, absolutely, Colin, and what you're saying there about the Ofgem scam, I mean, like the thought of perhaps getting £400 cash is maybe more appealing than it going straight into your energy. So you can see why people, it's almost like, why they, get caught up in that. That's really helpful, that overview, Colin. Thank you. Catherine, if I can come to you, please.
Thank you. Well, like everybody, I've seen all of those scams that everybody's talked about. Certainly the energy type scams in all sorts of forms, from even people trying to hard sell insulation, that sort of thing. A lot of banking scams, seen those as well with all the delivery type things. Also seen quite a lot with Apple Pay, and those seem to be affecting a lot of our teenagers, because we've got to remember scams these days don't just affect a certain demographic. They don't affect just that 86-year-old person that lives alone. It actually affects our teenagers as well. And of course, we're still getting the ones with the Microsoft, with the downloading software. But most common at the moment for me is the WhatsApp scams, which I think are very, very scary. And I'm sure that we'll come into a little bit more detail about that later on. Unfortunately, as Colin said, the way that the scammers exploit whatever's going on in the current climate is absolutely incredible. Something is announced on the television or in the media, and within seconds those scammers are actually exploiting that. So that it just surprises me how quickly, and we have to adapt to that as well.
And I think that's a really important point, Catherine, as well, about it's everyone. It's all demographics who can be affected by scams. And I think that's, we really need to keep that in mind when we're developing our prevention work and how we can engage with different groups. That's all really, really helpful, everybody. Yeah, so moving on, what should consumers be aware of when they receive unsolicited calls, emails, or text messages? Colin, if you wouldn't mind going first with this one, please.
Well, I think it's always about taking a step back and considering the source of where the contacts come from. So whether it be calls, emails, or text messages, we all live busy lives. We're all running about, responding to family members, going to work, doing different things that sometimes the messages coming in, we can get so many on a day-to-day basis that the actual scams get kind of mixed up on everything else. I think that it's important to look at the way that the communication comes across. So specifically looking at the way numbers appear in text messages. So we've got scammers that can use number spoofing to appear like legitimate organisations. So it might say bank at the top of the message as opposed to a number, or have the name of the bank that you do business with. And a lot of the scammers that we've come across engage with consumers in familiar ways, that they've maybe gained information from other scams that they've perpetrated against a specific person. They know something that they're waiting on. So it could be a message from the bank. It could be information about their car tax. That was one that I've seen recently as well. And the same goes for phone calls as well. So the scammers are in the way of engineering situations and manipulating technology to appear more legitimate. Sometimes these contacts are indistinguishable from the real organisation contacting you. But again, it's important to take a step back and consider whether the person that reaching out to you is who they say they are. And the differences usually lie in the details. So it can be spelling errors in emails and text messages, funny spacing and alignment and fonts. That's something that I come across quite a lot in emails, especially. They kind of use crazy fonts when compared to the usual that you would get in an email. Alignment in messages as well, or long complicated email addresses, just something that seems a bit different. Additionally, the other thing to watch out for are the claims and statements being made, sometimes exaggerated and unrealistic. So it's important to avoid getting caught up in the moment in situations like that.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Colin. I think working in this area, it certainly heightens your sort of own experience when you're receiving a phone call, especially if it's an unknown number, it comes up on your phone. And what I now do is reach for Google, have a look at it. And there's even been situations where I've Googled the number, it does indeed say this is legitimate, this is the genuine number, but I've still been apprehensive. And I think what you're saying, Colin, as well about see when it ties in with something you're expecting, it kind of makes you think, you know, is that must be real? And I've ended up just actually phoning whoever it was. It was, for me, it was the NHS, and I ended up just phoning them directly and just to say, you know, I've missed a few calls from you. I just want to make sure that my appointment's still going ahead. And, you know, it was all fine, but it was that just, I wanted to just double check that it was okay. And because it was an automated message. So, no, I think just taking your time to react definitely is absolutely key. Catherine, can I bring you in, please?
Yeah, and again, you're quite lucky, Laura, because I think we're all going to echo and agree with each other when it comes down to all these scam things. Absolutely, if it comes out of the blue, think about it. Give yourself 5 minutes. Do you really want to respond? I think if they're asking for money, that is always a sign for you to go, just think, why are they asking for money, particularly if it's come out the blue? And it doesn't matter whether this is an email, text, telephone call, or even a knock on the door. Just be very, very cautious. Yes, look at email addresses and do a little bit of checking, bit of digging. I mean, there's so much facilities out there for us to now actually do a little bit of digging. Although don't rely on that, as you said, Laura. Sometimes, you know, it'll come up with something that you think, I'm still not sure about. It's about, we've also got to be really, really careful about those surveys that we do or the conversations that we have, because we've got to be very, very careful about sharing our personal details. Because remember, sometimes those scammers aren't there to scam us immediately. It's about data harvesting. It's about trying to get our trust, and it's about trying to use that personal data at a later date. And the other thing as well to be really cautious about is there's the whole thing about the whole, you know, we know that the banking scams, that sort of thing, the ultimate aim for a scammer is to get our money to finance their criminal lifestyle. So it's things like using the 159, using 159 to actually check that is from your bank, and using those facilities that are actually available to us.
Thanks, Catherine. You know, I think that's a really interesting point as well about harvesting the data. And certainly, like many people, I've got a smartphone, use it to play games, and it'll come up, you know, with the adverts, or to have more lives or whatever, you know, you have to, you know, watch this ad. But what I've started seeing recently is it's a small pop-up survey, and it asks about who's living in the household. And I'm just always very reticent to even respond to it. So I always click the option, no, I don't want to answer this. But, you know, you just wonder, where is that data then going to, and how is that being used? Because it seems very an obscure question. So I'm always just making sure, no, I don't want to answer it. And there's a few other questions that do come up like that I'm like, I'm not comfortable about this. You don't need to know that.
We see it all the time on social media, particularly on Facebook. It's even those quizzes, that sort of thing. People, and again, it's our teenagers. It's a certain demographic that will reply to that. Or, you know, I'm sorry, I'm saying Facebook. My teenagers don't even use Facebook anymore. But things like, you know, the TikTok and the Snapchat. But maybe it's me that uses the Facebook and more susceptible to that sort of scam. But it's true though. They're asking for your date of birth, the name of your pet dog, and that sort of thing. You know, so you know, there's lots of things.
Well, thanks for that, Catherine. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add to this as well?
I suppose my bit will just be a recap of what Colin and Catherine have been saying. And the most important thing for me is what Colin said: take your time and think before you do anything. Imagine you're walking around a supermarket and somebody comes up and says to you, give me the contents of your bank account. Would you do it? No, you wouldn't. So why would you do it online or with a telephone call? Do you actually deal with the bank, company or organisation that are in touch with you? If you don't have an Amazon Prime account, why would you even stay on the phone? Put the phone down. Does it sound right? Does it look right? Do you get a bad feeling about it, as you were saying? Absolutely. The email's really important as well, isn't it, Colin? Because if you look at the source email, they're just a wacky list of numbers and letters, and they mean nothing. That's a really good indication that it's a scam. And being with Neighbourhood Watch, and a lot of our members are really good at spelling and they're great at grammar, these are the things to check, because they get it wrong, and very wrong. Is your name spelled correctly? If it's from your bank, they're not going to email you anyway. They will know how to spell your name. So just kind of recapping what everybody's saying, there's lots of wee indicators there that people can get, and just don't give them your money. That's it, really.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And it is about taking your time and,
Yeah,
you know, just looking for these little cues. I've received correspondence through email before addressed to a Mr. Laura Jameson, and I thought, well, you're from a legitimate source. You've got my contact details. You know what they are. So, you know, like you say, it's taking our time with this and just making sure that we're not rushing, because we don't need to rush into making any decisions. We've got the time.
Just what you were both saying, Mark and Catherine, it's as easy to get caught up in the moment on social media, etc. So very recently, actually, in the last couple of days, I had a situation happen quite close to home. A relative who understands the work that I do and is generally quite savvy about scams, received a call from someone claiming to be reaching out, offering loft insulation inspection. So she could hear call centre noise in the background on the call. The person claimed that they were offering the loft insulation to help reduce energy costs. So it's just going back to that, playing on the most current situation. The name of the organisation sounded legitimate, but the call she received after the initial call from the engineer who was going to visit was asking a few questions. An alarm bell started ringing when she was asked if there'd be anyone else in the house who would object to him visiting or the work being carried out. And she didn't at the time think anything of it and said no. But then she called me and said, "Is that normally something someone would ask?" Realising that something wasn't right, she tried to cancel the appointment. She did 1471 to try and get the engineer's number. Couldn't get the engineer's number. It was a withheld number. Looked back in the call logs on her phone and tried to call the number that had originally called her, which was an 0141 number, and was told that the number's not in service. So she wasn't even able to cancel the appointment. She eventually got a call from the call centre saying that the engineer was running late on the day that they were meant to be visiting. At which point she said, "Look, I'm not interested in the appointment anymore. I've been advised against it." But it's one of these situations. It just goes to show they can be so convincing. They can appear legitimate at the time, but when you do a wee bit of digging into the background, the telephone numbers and the name of the company, it kind of throws up red flags, and it's about watching for the wee red flags.
No, absolutely, Colin. And I think that's a really good point as well, because it's the realization that something's amiss and people think, well, you know, what do I do now? And I suppose, you know, building on that and building on, you know, what we're discussing there, if consumers are concerned about any communication they've received, how can they find trusted information, legitimate support? Where can they go for help, really? And if I could start with Catherine, please.
Well, do you know, there's actually an amazing amount of support out there, but do you know, the first thing I think people should do is actually speak amongst each other, because those community networks, that speaking to the neighbour, is a sort of thing. It's so important, because then somebody could actually say, "Oh, that doesn't sound right," and then it's about looking at all the information that's available. I mean, there are so many great sources. I wouldn't even know where to start. Citizens Advice Direct Scotland. There is an incredible wealth of information out there. Certainly, you know, we would always advise trading standards to contact Advice Direct Scotland, and that's the first line of advice. But, you know, it's just even things like doing your own little research, but certainly speaking about it, and never, ever feel embarrassed. It's like the conversation that Colin's just had with a relative. Thank goodness that they were able to sort of pick up the phone. You know, we need to have those easy conversations. Just, it happens to everybody. What was it? Something like, I think in your statistics, was it 97% of people had received some sort of scam over the last couple of years, you know, speak about it. You're not alone.
Thanks, Catherine. I think that's really important, actually, and looking out for your neighbours and having the chat over the fence, or when you're coming back from the shops, and just engaging in that discussion. And because you never know who they'll go on and speak to, and it's all about that raising awareness. I think that's a really, really good, a great thing to be doing. Mark, what about yourself? So
I would say get yourself along to neighbourhoodwatchscotland.co.uk and sign up and become part of the Neighbourhood Alert. We put out details of scams that come in from our members, and we also share weekly scam share from Trading Standards Scotland. Lots of information there. Become part of that community. And from our side, that we would say that's a really good first step to educating yourself about scams and you know, looking after yourself, your friends, and your neighbours. Yep.
Thanks, Mark. I've signed up and I think it's brilliant, and I've been encouraging my friends and family to do the same, because I think it is just so helpful, and I love the localised approach that it takes as well. I've seen the alert system working and it's fab. So no, thank you for that, Mark. So
and I know the details will be at the end of this presentation, so you'll be able to get that and come along and sign up.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Mark. Colin, what about yourself?
Again, it's just echoing what everyone else has said, sharing experience and getting word out of common scams, even just having the conversation with the neighbour, or reaching out to someone at Advice Direct Scotland or Neighbourhood Watch Scotland to say, I've noticed that this is going on, can you share it with a wider audience? And we find that through a lot of our case studies that we share specifically, and we've seen it in the things that Trading Standards and Trading Standards Scotland share as well. It's all about sharing experience and understanding that it could happen to anyone. So again, reporting scams is important, not just from an individual point of view, but from a collective as well.
And we'll make sure, Colin, that we share details for the helpline. There's online chat as well. It's a great resource, and I think really beneficial for consumers. So we'll pull all of that together so people have access to that. And no, I think absolutely, just to echo what everyone said, is about just getting that conversation going, taking your time. And I suppose just to finish then, if you could give consumers just one top tip to help them avoid scams, what would that be? Colin, if I can start with you, please.
Take a step back, look at the situation as a whole and assess it. Don't be pulled in by stories or offers, and try and think of it objectively. If something sounds too good to be true, 9 out of 10 times it probably is.
Catherine, what about yourself?
I've just got a simple one really, Laura. Question everything.
I like that one. And Mark, what about yourself?
I would say, don't say it'll never happen to me. Educate yourself and increase your knowledge of scams, and have that conversation with your family, friends and neighbours. And particularly watch out for those that are vulnerable round about you. If something's going on, get help, get assistance. And just one wee thing, telephone calls. If you're bombarded with scam calls, consider a call blocker. Absolutely. They can make a complete difference to somebody's life when it becomes terrible for them.
100%. Back that one up, Mark.
Yep.
Oh, the call blockers are fantastic, aren't they? They really do make a difference for, you know, for all consumers as well. We've been working with Truecaller for a long time now, and they've been absolutely fantastic. The unit is amazing, and we've been able to help so many consumers with such a diverse range of, you know, needs required. So, you know, they're absolutely fantastic. Really good.
I've got a very close family relative who was being bombarded with calls, maybe 12 or 15 calls a day. They suffer from Alzheimer's and dementia, and it was getting more and more difficult for them to cope with the calls. They built an aggression during the day in the calls. I got Truecaller for this person, and the day it was fitted, it cut these calls by 100%. And in the last 2 years, we've been lucky if there's been a handful of calls, and it's made such a great improvement to their quality of life and the pressure taken off them. So whether it's using ones that are through your telephone provider or having an external box like Truecaller, it's absolutely worth considering investing in that.
Oh, that's good to
Yeah,
hear.
yeah.
That's
So
really
worth
good to
having.
hear. So I think it's been a really informative session today, and I'd just like to thank everyone for watching. I hope you found it useful. I certainly have. And I'd like to thank the panel so much for coming along, sharing their knowledge and expertise. It's so much appreciated. But the discussion doesn't stop here. Please do get in touch with any questions you have, and we'll make sure that we get back to you. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and sign up to our weekly Scam Share bulletin to keep up to date on the latest scams and how to avoid them. For more information on the campaign itself, you can visit www.tsscot.co.uk. And finally, thanks again to our panel and to everyone who's joined us. Have a great day, everybody.